This problem asks us to use the giant 1 to find the common denominator for each of the following fractions. And then, once we've done that, we can find the answer to the next questions. Which of the fractions is closest to 0, or which has the smallest absolute value? Now, those last two questions are not really two different questions. They really mean the same thing. When you ask which fraction has the smallest absolute value, that means which fraction is closest to 0. It doesn't matter whether the fraction is positive or negative. We want to find the number that's smallest, in other words, the number that's closest to 0, and that means the number that has the smallest absolute value. Okay, so how are we going to find that out? Well, we have 5/8, and then we have a -3/8, so we have two fractions that have eighths as the denominator, and then we have a -1/2, and we have 3/4. So we need to find a common denominator for each of those fractions. One way we can do that is to think about what we need to multiply those denominators by in order to have the same common denominator. To find what we need to multiply by, we can find the multiples of those numbers and then compare them. So let's take the three different fraction denominators that we have here. We have 8 and halves, or 2, and fourths, or 4. And let's find the multiples for those different numbers. So 8 is pretty big, so we may not have to find that many different multiples for that fraction compared to the other different multiples that we have. So let's take 8 times 1 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 3 is 24, times 4 is 32. And we'll stop right there for right now and go on to the number 2. 2 times 1 is 2, times 2 is 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Multiples of 4 are 4 times 1 is 4, times 2 is 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36. Okay, so those are the multiples. And we can see that we have 16 in each of the different rows, but there's a smaller number. 8 is actually the denominator that's the smallest that they have in common, or the multiple that's the smallest that these have in common. So that's the least common multiple for 8 and 2 and 4. Now, we need to figure out what we're going to multiply each of these fractions by in order to give us a denominator of 8. Well, 5/8 is easy. That's going to be 1 over 1, 1. 5/8 times 1 over 1 equals 5/8. -1/2 times 4/4 is going to give us -4/8. And 3/4, we're going to multiply that times 2 halves, 2 over 2, in order to give us 6/8. And then -3/8, again, we're going to multiply by 1 over 1, and that's going to give us -3/8. Now we have 4 fractions with common denominators that we can easily compare. So again, we're looking for which one of these fractions has the smallest absolute value, or which one of the fractions, more easily said, which one of the fractions is closest to 0. And it doesn't matter whether the number is positive or negative. The smaller the numerator, the number on top is, if they all have common denominators, then that's going to be the smaller fraction. In this case, the number with the smallest numerator, the smallest fraction, happens to be a negative fraction here. It's -3/8. And that's the answer to which of these fractions is closest to 0. In this case, it does happen to be a negative, but when we're looking at absolute value, the fraction closest to 0, it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. What we do need to figure out is what the common denominator is for each of the fractions that we're looking at, and then find the one that's the smallest, the one that has the smallest numerator. Once you feel comfortable with this problem, go ahead and try the practice problem that has been grouped with this problem on the homework quiz for this week.